Hi there, and welcome to the latest episode of Off the Data Provided, an interpersonal communication podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. On today's episode, we are going to talk about nonverbal communication, as well as offer some guidelines for effective nonverbal communication. We will talk about such concepts as responsiveness, liking, power, underscore that there are several different types of nonverbal behavior. And then, of course, as I said before, we'll give you some guidelines for effective nonverbal communication. After that, we will delve into our Ask Dr. Shepard this week, which is around the concept of ghosting. As always, if you want to submit an Ask Dr. Shepard, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So when we talk about communication in general, we have to understand that communication is broken up into nonverbal communication and verbal communication. So verbal communication consists of the language, the words, right? The symbols in the form of spoken or written words, where nonverbal communication includes the symbols that aren't words, such as facial expressions, postures, tone of voice. I tell my students that nonverbal communication, in essence, is all aspects of communication other than words. Nonverbal communication is, of course, learned and guided by rules, and these rules oftentimes help us reduce the ambiguity of nonverbal communication by telling us what certain behaviors are understood to count as. And so we'll talk about, right, those constructive rules and when and where certain behaviors are appropriate or inappropriate. So those, of course, would be regulative rules. And so just a reminder, right, constitutive rules define what a particular communication means or stands for, while regulative rules regulate interpretations by specifying when, how, where, and with whom to communicate about certain things. So, regulative rule, would it be appropriate to talk to your professor about your dating life? Probably not. I know, unless it's in my interpersonal communication course and students are using it as an example to underscore a concept, I really don't think it's appropriate for us to talk about those things, and vice versa. I wouldn't talk about my dating life or history unless it is to underscore those concepts. And then constitutive rules define what a particular communication means or stands for. What is flirting? How do you define that? Is it batting your eyelashes? Is it touching someone on the lower part of their back? Is it touching their thigh? What do we define as such? And when we understand that nonverbal communication is guided by these rules, right, constitutive and regulative rules, we can already see how there can be a lot of miscommunication when it comes to nonverbal communication. So as we underscored, nonverbal communication includes all aspects of communication other than words. So it's your facial expressions, your body posture, how you utter words, so the inflection, the volume, the rate, the pitch, features of the environment, such as the lighting or temperature, personal image or interaction, such as dress and furniture. And with all of this, it can complicate how we communicate. So clearly, nonverbal communication interacts with verbal communication. It can possibly repeat verbal communication or underscore. So if I ask you how your day is and I'm leaning in, I'm smiling, my eyes are wide and bright, non-verbally, I'm probably showing you that I care about how your day is. But if I say, how's your day? And I roll my eyes, or I'm looking at my nails or my phone, it maybe is incongruent. It contradicts that verbal message. So verbally, I'm asking how your day is, but non-verbally, I'm contradicting that message potentially. We also know that nonverbal communication may highlight verbal communication, so you might put an emphasis on a certain word. So maybe I'm talking to someone and I say, I love pizza. And when I say the word pizza, maybe I say it louder. And so it maybe highlights that I actually genuinely love pizza. It also may complement or add to the word, so certain gestures or increased volume can add to what you are saying. So, a perfect example of that would be if you are having conversation with someone that you're getting to know and you want them to know that you support them. And if you say, I support you, and maybe you rub their back a little bit, or I'm here for you, and you rub their back, you're complimenting. You're not showing support verbally by saying it, but non-verbally, right? You're rubbing their back, or maybe you hold their hands and you look into their eyes and like, I got you. I'm here for you. And we also know that nonverbal communication may substitute for verbal behaviors or communication. So when I'm teaching, for instance, when I ask my class, does that make sense? Do you understand? Oftentimes they respond nonverbally. They don't say yes. They're usually nodding their heads or they're smiling. That is a substitute for saying, I understand. So when we think about nonverbal communication and it comes to relationship level meaning, we have these categories of responsiveness, liking, and power. So when it comes to responsiveness or responsive, we know eye contact, inflections, facial expressions, and body posture can be ways that we show we are responsive to someone. If I'm giving you direct eye contact, usually means I'm paying attention. If I'm giving, positive facial expressions, smiling with my eyes, or smizing, as Tyra Banks famously created or quoted, and body posture, am I leaning in? Am I getting closer to you? We also know non-verbally how we let somebody know that we like them. Usually we're smiling, we might be touchy, or on the flip side, if I don't like you, maybe I'm frowning, I'm slouching, I'm moving away from you, I'm leaned away, I'm disinterested, I'm focused on my phone. These are non-verbal cues that we oftentimes interpret. These are maybe those rules that we talked about before, right? Constitutive rules. We've kind of learned as a society that if someone's not giving you eye contact, someone's not smiling, someone is moving further away from you, usually it is a negative interpersonal sign. And then, of course, power. So power, oftentimes space can express power. So power dynamics, usually in a classroom, for instance, as I am a professor, if I am standing when I lecture and I'm standing above my students, there's a power dynamic expressed there as well. We also know that silence can be a usage of power. Someone asks you a question, maybe you don't feel like answering it, you just give them silence. And so if we understand nonverbal communication in this way, as we've underscored, right, it is helped and ruled by these constitutive and regulative rules. It can underscore, it can contradict, it can complement, it can highlight, it can repeat, it can substitute our verbal communication, it can represent our liking of something or someone, it can represent power dynamics, it can represent our responsiveness. We also have to be aware of the different types of nonverbal behavior. So, of course, body posture and gestures are going to be one of the most obvious aspects of nonverbal communication. And we call that kinesics. So this is body and face motion. And this can signal sometimes if we're open to interactions. Our faces can say that I'm disinterested, I'm upset, I'm tired, I'm bored, I'm interested, I'm feeling it, I'm not. We can oftentimes surmise that non-verbally. But what also is interesting about that is sometimes we misinterpret people's nonverbal communication. So a really great example I always use is if you put your hands on your head or kind of holding up, propping your head. So I famously do this, especially if students are presenting. I will kind of lean in and I'll hold my head in my hands. And so some people might interpret that as me being tired, me being disinterested. But for me, I'm actually leaning in. I'm trying to hear you better. I'm trying to connect. So we can see how face and body motion in that example can maybe be misinterpreted. We also know that haptics is another form of nonverbal behavior and communication, and that is touch. So you can show people that you support them through touch, that you like them through touch. You can also show people that you don't, maybe from recoiling from touch or touching them in certain ways that shows you're not interested. We also have ophalexics. I'm probably saying that wrong, right? But smell is also nonverbal communication. And we know that artifacts are also forms of nonverbal communication, right? Our personal objects. They can be used to announce our identities, to personalize our environments. And we use artifacts oftentimes to express our cultural and ethnic identities, and also can announce our professional identities as well. So we want to be mindful and aware of that. And going back to just haptics for a second, we do know that women are also more likely to assert touch to show liking and intimacy, where men are more likely to use touch to assert power and control over someone. So we can see how these different nonverbal communication behaviors are used to say things without actually verbally saying anything. So if I smell really nice, right, going back to olfactics, right, which I'm probably butchering. If I smell nice or florally, it might mean that I'm open or inviting to engage with people. A perfect example, I went to a street festival, I want to say about 2 years ago with a friend, and he and I were walking, and a woman walked by me, and I was wearing a nice sweet cologne, and she walked by me with her boyfriend, and she turned around and engaged with me, right? My scent gave off that I was open to engagement, and I am, right? Even though I always tell people I am always masked in public. I have my headphones on usually, and I usually have shades on, so it gives very much don't ask, don't speak, don't see, nothing, right? The kind of monkeys, right? Covering the ears, covering the eyes, covering the face. But in reality, I am very friendly, very open. And so my scent in that moment gave that nonverbal cue away. So maybe while I didn't have AirPods in, right? But while I did have shades on and I had a mask on, my scent still gave that I was approachable. And then other aspects of nonverbal communication behavior are also proxemics, which is personal space. So space can announce our status. So with greater space and more desirable space, we usually assume those that have higher status in culture. So we can even see that in corporate America especially, right? C-suite executives usually have bigger offices or on higher floors, right? All of this is non-verbally communicating that these people are quote unquote important, have higher status. Usually the CEO is not on the main floor in a cubicle with everybody else or, on a lower floor. Usually the CEO and the top execs are at the top floor of their building. We also know that environmental factors are elements of settings that affect how we feel, think, and act. So we feel more relaxed usually in rooms with comfortable chairs than in rooms with stiff furniture. We also know that depending on where you fit, right, a cold room oftentimes keeps people awake, where a warmer room will kind of make you more sedentary. You might get a little sleepy. I know, for instance, in movie theaters, I just went to see a movie yesterday and they didn't have the AC on. It was a little hot and I was getting a little sleepy, but it was 4:00 in the afternoon. I shouldn't be tired, but the environmental factor was kind of lulling me to sleep a little bit. We also know paralanguage, which are our vocal qualities, can also inform things. So the rate, the pitch of your speaking voice. So if you're speaking really, really fast, I'm someone who's known to speak really, really fast. Maybe it's the New Jersey in me. Sometimes people will read that as maybe you being nervous. So sometimes it's important to slow down our speech, but also when we think about that paralanguage, right, the vocal qualities that we have, the rate, the pitch of our voice and our tone, this can also help us underscore some things. So I talk to my public speaking students a lot that sometimes you speak in kind of your normal conversational voice, but if I really want you to focus on something, I might slow down what I'm saying, because when I slow down what I'm saying outside of how I normally speak, that gets your listener to maybe pay attention. Okay, I'm not speaking at the same rate that I was before. This must be something really important. Let me focus on that. And we also know that silence is another nonverbal behavior communication that can sometimes convey content or maybe awkwardness as well. So, all of these things are going to come into play when we think about nonverbal communication. So, people are famous for saying how people believe nonverbal communication makes about 90 to 95% of all communication, and it does, because verbal communication are just the words that you say, and nonverbal is every single thing else that happens in that communication event. So it's going to be really important that we're mindful and aware of all of those nonverbal communication behaviors that we are giving off, as well as what other people are giving off. And this is where a lot of people believe that our nonverbals, quote unquote, tell more of the tale than our actual verbals, because a lot of people believe as if we cannot mask or hide our nonverbal communication, that our nonverbal communication will come through. So if I don't like someone, but I'm trying to be cordial, I'm asking them how their day is, my nonverbal, I might not say it as sweet or as nice if I'm really not interested or care about that person. So when it comes to guidelines for effective nonverbal communication, we first and foremost, as I kind of said before, want to monitor our nonverbal communication. We want to figure out what's landing, what's not. So people talk about having kind of a resting bitch face, or, having an outward appearance that's more stern. Well, that's a nonverbal communication that says maybe you're not interested, maybe you're not approachable. So are there ways to maybe improve that or fix that? Are there things that you can do to welcome people? And we also know that it's important that when it comes to interpreting others' nonverbal communication, that we're aware that we can totally be misinterpreting their behaviors. Because just because one interpretation, right, I'm holding my head up with my hand, might be viewed as me being disinterested. As I highlighted before, for me personally, when I do that, it means I'm actually very interested. I'm trying to focus and hone in on you and the words that you're saying and to pick up those nonverbals. So we can see how there can be such miscommunication when it comes to those nonverbals. Or when you ask somebody how they're doing and they say, I'm all right, but they say it in a way that gives off that they're not really all right, you might second guess or question that, and you might press further. So I'm reminded of this famous, or maybe it's not famous, but a love and hip hop video that makes its way around the timeline ever so often with Tierra Marie, where she asks somebody how they're doing, and the person says they're all right, and she's like, "You're all right? You're not all right, baby girl. It's okay not to be all right." And so Tierra Marie is interpreting that person's nonverbal. So even though they say that they're all right, she can tell by their body movements, their face, their engagement, maybe lack of eye contact, that they're not doing all right, that they're preoccupied with something, that something is going on that is impacting them. So while we as humans more broadly interpret and believe nonverbal communication more than we believe verbal communication, it's going to be important to check our assumptions with those people regarding their nonverbal communication, especially when we feel as if that nonverbal communication is incongruent with the verbal communication. And so when I say incongruent, it means that it's not lining up. So if I say that I'm doing great, but I say it like this, right? Let's say someone asks me, how are you doing? I'm saying, I'm doing great. How I said it, right? My vocal quality, you can't see my face, right? But I kind of rolled my eyes, I looked down. So my face, my body movements are saying that I'm not doing great. So check in, right? The message is incongruent. My words are saying I'm great, but my nonverbals, my face, my body movement, my paralanguage are all saying I'm not okay. So we want to check in with people, and sometimes they're incongruent because someone is working through something and they don't want to share that with you, or they are processing it in a way that they're not ready to share. And so we also should hopefully respect that as interpersonal communicators and be mindful and aware of that. So that is essentially nonverbal communication in a nutshell, we definitely want to practice that person-centeredness overall, which is where we perceive distinctions between people and we can adapt our communication to particular individuals. So, as we've shared before, person-centeredness is oftentimes linked to cognitive complexity, where people who are cognitively complex are able to perceive others and situations in more comprehensive and interrogate them in different ways than less cognitively complex people. So essentially, right, all of us want to have high person-centeredness and high cognitive complexity and realize that the nonverbal behaviors of Marcus are going to be a little different than the non-behavior of somebody else and then somebody else and somebody else. And so just because my nonverbal behaviors meant A doesn't mean that means A for the same person, or even how you would respond nonverbally doesn't mean it's the same thing that somebody else would as well. So we want to make sure that we're aware of that we're not holding people to those constitutive and regulative rules that also they might not even have agreed to. So that's also what's interesting or fascinating, especially about nonverbal communication, is we're aware of constitutive rules, which define what particular communication events mean or stand for, but doesn't mean that everybody has subscribed to those rules either. So just because my rule of me holding my head up means I'm actually paying attention doesn't mean that that's the same thing for the next person or the person after that. So being mindful, being aware of this, checking in with people about this are great ways to hopefully avoid miscommunication and assumptions that can lead to a misinterpretation of the communication event. So that is nonverbal communication in a brief nutshell. Of course, there's so much more. You could have probably an entire just podcast series on nonverbal communication. But when it comes to interpersonal communication, I think it is important to highlight nonverbal communication in this way and to get us thinking about what are we conveying nonverbally? And is it congruent with what we're saying? Is it incongruent with what we are saying? And if it is incongruent, why is that? And is there a way for me to make sure that my message that I'm trying to communicate to someone is actually more so congruent than not? So that is our mini lecture, I guess one would say, for today. And now we are going to move into our Ask Dr. Shepard for the week, which, as I previewed before, is around the concept of ghosting. So if you do have an Ask Dr. Shepard that you would like to get my opinion on, please feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So this question comes from an anonymous submitter, and I'm not going to read the entirety. I kind of summed it up in my own words, what they were asking me, because they did give a lot of personal details that I don't necessarily think are maybe appropriate to share with the masses. So with that said, I will delve in. Hi, Dr. Shepard. I'm reaching out because I feel as if I am on the precipice of getting ghosted. I matched with this person 3 weeks ago on a dating app, and we were having great communication. We shifted it offline. We FaceTimed a few times and had really great rapport. But now I feel as if I'm double texting until I get a response. I'm always reaching out and I'm not hearing much back. What do you think I should do? Well, thank you, Anonymous, for asking this question. I think a lot of us have probably been ghosted in our dating experiences, or maybe you've done the ghosting. I know I haven't actually, because I believe ghosting is unethical and ineffective. But for me, how I define ghosting is typically this is someone that you have spent a substantial amount of time getting to know, and you have a rapport going with this person, and there is a shift in that rapport. So I know back when I used to be dating, I would experience this from time to time where, I'd have really great text conversations with people. Maybe we talked on the phone once or twice, and then it would feel as if it had shifted from them. What I used to do when this happened, and I advocate still for my interpersonal communication students to do this, is to send out a preemptive ghosting text. And so for me, this has worked wonders and is also why I typically don't respond to people after they've ghosted me if they respond back months or years later, because I let them know what it is. So in essence, the pre-ghosting text that I send is, hey, it's been nice getting to know you over these past blah, blah, blah. I've really enjoyed our conversations, and, I'll drop some things that I've gleaned from them or enjoyed, and I'll say, it's been a pleasure getting to know you, and if you're interested in further getting to know me, I would just offer that it would be nice for you to step up your level of communication because I feel as if it has shifted. But if you aren't interested in getting to know me anymore, I appreciate the time that we have shared, and I wish you all the best. In essence, that's what it says. I could probably scroll back. I'd have to probably scroll back several years, probably when the last time I sent one of those. But in essence, you highlight that you've enjoyed getting to know the person. You reference some of those details. You do highlight how you feel as if there's been a change in their communication. And if they're still interested in getting to know you, that, okay, like, hey, could you step it up? And if not, you wish them all the best. I've sent this out, usually I would say 9.9 times, but let's say 9.5 times out of 10, you don't get a response back. And that's fine, right? You've said your piece, you move on. Sometimes, right, you do get a response back. And that's where the preemptive ghosting text allows for the person to step up and address the potential miscommunication. We don't know these people. They're getting to know us. You're not a priority in this person's life, nor do I think you should be, but you are slowly building up to that. And so maybe some life events have happened. You're clearly not a priority, nor should you be. They haven't met you yet. Or maybe you've gone on one date or two dates, but you haven't really solidified anything yet. And so sending this allows them the opportunity, if they do respond, say, hey, life has happened. I'm so sorry. I do enjoy getting to know you as well. Let's figure something out. Great. Bingo. They also might respond and say, hey, I thought about it. I'm actually not that interested in you. Cool. Usually, as I said, though, they just don't respond. But if they do eventually circle back, to me, you're well within your ethical right, as I do now, where I just don't respond at all. Right? I said what it was months or now in this day and age, years, right? As I tweeted out right before I kind of recorded this, like, when a picture of you has gone quote unquote viral, when people from the past are reaching out, right? I've gotten some DMs and some texts from people from eons ago who ghosted me, right? But now you're interested potentially in me because I guess a picture crossed your way. So to me, to remedy and to make it more ethical and effective, send out that pre-ghosting text. Hey, I've realized there's been a change in our communication. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. If the change is due to you're no longer interested, I totally respect that and I wish you the best. But if you are still interested, please step it up. That's what I would do in your situation, Anonymous. So that is our episode for this week, and I hope to see you all on the next one. Have a good one.